The Kuva Nukor, one of the most popular secondaries in Warframe, and for a good reason. It is an extremely versatile beam weapon that is used for profit taker, priming, and dealing a lot of damage when built correctly. So let's get straight into it. The Kuva Nukor is a Kuva weapon, which means you will have to hunt a lich for it. If you don't know how to do liches, I have made an entire guide on how to do them if you want to check it out in the cards on the top right. Because it is a Kuva weapon, we get a free element with it. I would suggest two. One is magnetic for a free combination of elements, which is super useful for priming and profit taker. For the second one, if you want a full damage Nukor, you can go heat. Heat will scale really well with this weapon and will allow you to do huge heat ticks because of the insane status chance this weapon possesses. How does it work? Well, like I mentioned, it's a beam weapon that does mainly radiation damage, but you get a free element on it because it is a lich weapon. You shoot a beam with a range of 29 meters that chains to 2 nearby enemies. So you will be damaging 3 enemies at once within 9 meters of the original target. The enemies damaged by the chained beams will take 50% of the main beam damage. It's also worth noting that the Kuva Nukor consumes 0.5 ammo per damage tick, and the damage ramps up from 30% to 100% over 0.6 seconds when firing, and when you stop firing for 0.8 seconds, the damage decays back to 30% over 2 seconds. When you kill an enemy, the enemy's corpse will still allow the beam to connect and chain to nearby enemies. And to top all of this, the Kuva Nukor has the highest critical multiplier of all weapons in the game. This was taken directly from the wiki, so this is just another reminder: if you ever need anything in Warframe, the wiki is your best friend. The Kuva Nukor is obviously a lot better than the original because of the stat increases and the fact that you get a free element with it. Now, what makes the Kuva Nukor quite special is the microwave effect it has. This weapon procs an invisible status effect called microwave. It's a unique status effect which quite literally enlarges body parts of the enemies that you hit. So you can get giant bobbleheads, and it's quite funny. The microwave procs have infinite duration, however the visual effect does not. What's so great about this besides the bobbleheads? Well, this microwave effect counts as a status effect, which means that mods like Condition Overload, Galvanized Aptitude, Galvanized Savvy, and Galvanized Shot all count this as a status effect, so you do more damage. This makes the Kuva Nukor a very strong primer, and technically the best primer in the game. So let's talk about the first setup that we have here, which is used for Profit Taker. For Profit Taker, you can use the Kuva Nukor as an alternative to the Tenet Detron. For this setup, you will need a magnetic progenitor, so you cover more elements. Then for my specific setup here, I have built for viral and heat. So we will get viral, magnetic, radiation, and heat, which is an easy 4 elements for Profit Taker. You will want to go Hornet Strike, so you do more flat damage, as the Kuva Nukor does need help with some base damage scaling. Amalgam Barrel Diffusion or normal Barrel Diffusion for multi-shot, Pistol Pestilence, Deep Freeze for viral, and then a Corpus Bane because it does more damage to Profit Taker, Prime Pistol Gambit for crit chance, Lethal Torrent for fire rate and multi-shot, and then Primed Heated Charge for heat. You can use Runeless extensions for beam length because we benefit from having more distance, as Profit Taker is quite a big fight in the sense of your distance from the giant spider crab. And then for the arcane, we go Cascadia Flare. Or secondary dexterity will work too, because you will be using Exodia Contagion to kill random enemies, thus proccing dexterity really easily. If you do have a Tenet Detron instead, you can follow pretty much the exact same loadout. Then we have our primer setup. Remember I mentioned that the Kuva Nukor is technically the best primer in the game, and that is because of secondary encumber. Secondary Encumber is quite an expensive arcane, but very powerful. On status effect, 24% chance to trigger a second random status effect. Now generally there are 2 main primers that people use, the Epitaph and the Kuva Nukor, because of the huge status chance from both weapons and the fact that the Epitaph has a nice radial attack that applies many status effects in a decent range, plus the innate cold from the Epitaph. However, what makes the Kuva Nukor better is the fact that it's a beam weapon that A, applies a lot more status effects, and B, has a lot more ammo. Which means that secondary encumber works extremely well with the Kuva Nukor, as you get status effects like this, because it is a continuous stream of damage instead of the quick fire from the Epitaph. That's pretty much max status effects you're looking at right now. So you will receive max benefit from mods like Condition Overload, Galvanized Aptitude, etc. And this is where the Kuva Nukor has the upper hand. But there are the drawbacks in terms of that you can only prime 3 enemies at once instead of having a whole bunch of enemies being primed because of the massive range from Epitaph. Although I do enjoy the Epitaph playstyle a lot more personally, but in some cases the Kuva Nukor is actually a lot better. For your primer setup, you want to use the magnetic as well, and the mods are Amalgam Barrel Diffusion for multi-shot, Anemic Agility for fire rate, Auger Seeker for status duration, because status duration helps you with your priming so you have more time to switch over and shoot with your primary, Sure Shot for more status chance, Frostbite for cold, Lethal Torrent for more fire rate and multi-shot, Pistol Pestilence and Scorch. This will give you the same elements as the Profitecker setup, and then we have the secondary in combo. The Kuva Nukor is a brilliant primer, and you will do a lot of damage when pairing it with your melee with Conditioned Overload or a primary with Galvanized Aptitude. Although I will say, even with the huge status chance and fire rate, secondary in combo does take a little while to proc every status effect. So for the tougher target, it's best to just do a few bursts to get quite a few status effects and not focus on the maximum amount, and then just switch to your primary and do big PP damage. Now let's move on to the damage build. For this setup, you may need to farm a second Nukor, which has the heat progenitor. If you can, try and farm a high percentage because of the damage scaling is big here with the percentage of the progenitor. I did farm a second one for this video and it took forever because my lich was permanently dodging me and did not want to spawn, and I only got a 25% heat to top it. The mods we go is Galvanized Diffusion for huge multi-shot, and then you want to go a Bane of Choice to help you increase your ignite damage. This is really useful here. Prime Pistol Gambit for crit chance, Prime Target Cracker for critical damage, because remember the Kuva Nukor has the highest critical multiplier of 5 at base, and if you add a lot more crit damage, it's 10.5 critical multiplier. It's a very big damage multiplier. Pistol Pestilence over here, although I would say it is actually better to run a max rank Pistol Pestilence so that your weighting is higher than radiation, so you apply viral quicker and then you apply heat. Then Frostbiteable for viral and Lethal Torrent for fire rate and multi-shot, and then primed heated charge. And then we run Cascadia Flare because on heat status effect you get an extra 480% damage boost. When it comes to the damage Nukor, I would highly suggest running a ammo mutation because you run out of ammo really quickly with this weapon. Now we have different variations of building this weapon. Instead of doing Lethal Torrent, if you have an external source of increasing your fire rate, you could instead run Hornet Strike to scale the base damage up, which will help you do a lot more damage, and run a Bane so that your heat procs do a big amount of damage. Or what you can do is just go Hornet Strike and then Lethal Torrent, but then you're going to be missing out on your heat procs and your damage over time effects. So I would suggest running a Bane if you can. If you don't, it's okay. This setup works too. Also, you can switch out viral for corrosive instead. That will give you a nice amount of armor stripping. That works really well too, because if you pair corrosive with heat, it's basically a full armor strip, really strong, and you will do big amounts of damage. Now, although the Kuva Nukor has a very low critical strike chance, it tends to actually crit quite a bit, even with the 20% because of the beam and the amount of damage ticks that you hit off of an enemy. And that's pretty much how you build the damage Nukor. There's many versions, there's different ways you can build it. Generally, I just prefer running the Bane or whichever Bane you want, and then you run Lethal Torrent, which is, yeah. And there we go. That's pretty much the setup that I found to do quite a decent amount of damage. I quite enjoy this setup. And then when it comes to your Starchart, for those of you that are not in Steel Path and maybe you just do not have all these fancy primed mods, I understand. I know that most people show late game builds, so I'm trying to actually start making Starchart builds for those of you that are a bit early on in the game. And if you're on Starchart, something like this is very basic. These mods are quite easy to get. It's just that these 60% mods may be a little bit difficult, but they are worth farming because you will be using them all the time. A viral heat setup in Starchart, you will melt through everything. You do not need to stress. This will work really well for you. And if you're in Starchart, you won't have an arcane slot, and I don't think you're going to be worrying too much about ammo, but if you are, then use pistol ammo mutation and you're good to go. When it comes to Profitecker or any of the other builds, the same thing applies. If you don't have the prime version, just use the normal version and it will work still. My final thoughts for the Kuva Nukor. It is a very good weapon, and it's one of the most popular secondaries in Warframe. If you are in the Starchart or early Steel Path and you are looking for a good weapon, then you need to get the Kuva Nukor because you will land up using it all the way to late game in Warframe. It's 100% one of the first few Kuva weapons you should farm as you unlock liches in Warframe. It honestly does it all. When it comes to the damage build and the Profitecker build, the biggest drawback of the Kuva Nukor is its base damage. It does need more base damage and it needs a little bit of help. So if you can scale it with Eclipse or Raw to increase your ignite procs, then this weapon will be an absolute beast. Get it, it is worth it. And that's it for the video. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next one, my good tenor. Thank you so much for watching.